The Galactic Empire had always seen itself as the unquestioned authority in the universe, untouchable, unrivaled, and unstoppable. They ruled over countless worlds with an iron fist, their reach spanning light years in every direction. For centuries, they had never encountered anything that could challenge their dominance. Their armies were vast, their technology advanced, and their arrogance boundless. But what they didn't know, what no one could have predicted, was that humanity was about to step into the galactic spotlight, and we weren't going to bow to their rule. When we first encountered the Empire, we were nothing more than a blip on their radar, just another species struggling to make its way in the vast, indifferent universe. At least, that's what they thought. They didn't know our history, our resilience, or what we were capable of when backed into a corner. But all of that was about to change. The moment the Empire's scouts set their eyes on Earth, they thought they were simply marking another world for conquest. What they didn't anticipate was the warning we were about to give them. It all started with the sudden appearance of their fleet. Hundreds of ships, each one larger and more imposing than anything we had ever seen, dropping out of hyperspace and positioning themselves around our solar system. It didn't take long for us to realize what was happening. The message was clear. They were here to take what they wanted, and they weren't asking for permission. For the first time in history, the Galactic Empire was setting its sights on humanity. But what they didn't know was that they had made a grave mistake. We didn't act like other civilizations. We didn't cower. We didn't negotiate. Instead, we sent them a message, not through diplomacy, but through something far more potent, a warning. A warning that, if ignored, would have consequences beyond their understanding. The Empire was used to crushing planets into submission with the flick of a switch, reducing entire civilizations to ash. But humanity wasn't like the others. We didn't fall in line. We fought. We survived. And most importantly, we had the one thing the Empire didn't account for. We had heart. As their fleet moved closer, our leaders gathered. We didn't waste time debating what to do. We had no time for that. The Galactic Empire didn't operate like we did. Their bureaucracy was slow. Their arrogance clouded their judgment, and most importantly, they underestimated our resolve. Our response was simple but powerful. A single broadcast sent across every communication frequency, a transmission that echoed through the vast reaches of space. It wasn't just a warning, it was a statement. A statement that the Empire would have to reckon with. The message was short, to the point, and brutally honest. We are humanity. You may have conquered worlds before, but you have never faced anything like us. Leave now, or face the consequences. We didn't need to elaborate. We knew what we were capable of. We knew our military was nowhere near the scale of the Empire's, but we weren't going to rely on brute strength alone. We had something far more dangerous, a will to survive, and a resourcefulness that could match anything the Empire threw at us. But when they received our message, they didn't immediately retreat. The Empire didn't believe us. They couldn't. After all, in their centuries of dominance, no one had ever dared to challenge their authority. No one had ever stood up to them in such a direct, uncompromising way. They saw our warning as little more than a bluff, a minor inconvenience, nothing more than the ramblings of a fledgling species. But they were wrong. They would soon find out how wrong they were. What the Empire didn't understand was that humanity doesn't simply roll over when faced with an obstacle. It wasn't just about the technology we had or the strength of our military. It was about our ingenuity, our creativity, and our ability to adapt. The Empire, for all their might and their technology, were slow. They were predictable, and they had no idea what we had been preparing for. As we watched their fleet gather at the edge of our system, we began to make our move. The first phase of our plan was simple: disrupt their communications. While their ships were incredibly advanced, they had a reliance on their hyper-advanced technology to maintain control. What they didn't realize was that humanity had spent decades preparing for a day like this. We had reverse-engineered alien technology, learned how to manipulate energy, and most importantly, we had learned how to think like the enemy. Our first move hit them hard. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't an attack. It was a disruption. We scrambled their communications, sending their fleet into chaos. For the first time, the mighty Empire found itself on the defensive. Their command center, once a well-oiled machine, was suddenly at odds with itself. Without their communication, without their coordination, the Empire was blind. But this was only the beginning. The message we had sent wasn't just a threat, it was a declaration of our readiness. We had planned for every eventuality, and we knew the Empire would retaliate. We weren't foolish enough to think they would back down just because we'd sent a message. No, they would come for us. They would test us. And when they did, they would find out exactly what kind of species they had just provoked. As the Empire regrouped, preparing for their next move, we sat back and watched. We knew they wouldn't be able to resist. They would send their best commanders, their most powerful warships. And when they did, they would finally understand what it meant to face humanity. This wasn't just a warning anymore. It was a promise. A promise that we weren't just going to roll over and die. But then, as the tension between us and the Empire reached a boiling point, something happened that no one had predicted. A fleet of ships, previously undetected, appeared on the edge of the system, signaling a new and unexpected force. Who were they? And what did they want? Were they allies, enemies, or something entirely different? The question hung in the air as we stared at the unknown ships on our radar, wondering if this new player would change everything. Would this mysterious force help us in our fight, or would they bring a new set of challenges? And what would the Empire do next? Would they finally realize the true power of humanity, or would they make the fatal mistake of underestimating us one last time? Stay tuned for the next part of the story, where the fate of humanity and the future of the galaxy will be decided. The mysterious fleet loomed at the edge of our solar system, its ships appearing like shadows in the vastness of space. We couldn't identify them at first, but something about their sudden appearance felt deliberate. They didn't just emerge out of nowhere. They had to have been waiting, watching, and yet they hadn't made their presence known until now. And now, with the Empire's forces advancing, their timing couldn't have been more crucial or more terrifying. For all our preparation, all the strategies we had designed to face the Empire, this new fleet introduced an unpredictable variable we hadn't planned for. In the silence of space, with the weight of an entire species' future hanging in the balance, our command centers buzzed with activity. Specialists and strategists scrambled to analyze every bit of information they could gather about these unknown ships, but the data was sparse. Our scans couldn't penetrate their hulls. Every signal, every transmission from them was carefully blocked or scrambled. One thing was certain: they weren't friendly to the Galactic Empire. As we watched their ships hold their position just outside the Empire's fleet's line of sight, a grim realization set in. These newcomers weren't here to join the fight on our side. They were here for something else. But what? And more importantly, why now? Across the globe, leaders and military commanders were on high alert. They had no idea who these new ships belonged to or what their intentions were, but they understood one thing: this wasn't just about the Empire anymore. The stakes had just gotten much, much higher. It wasn't long before we received a cryptic transmission from one of their ships, a simple message, decoded and broadcast to every major military and political leader across the world. The transmission was brief, with only a single line that made every leader and soldier stop in their tracks. The Empire has made a mistake. The voice on the transmission was calm, unshaken. It didn't sound like the boastful arrogance of an alien warlord, nor did it carry the cold detachment of a military leader. It was as if this person had seen everything before, like they knew exactly how the Empire would react to a threat. But it wasn't just the message that unsettled us. It was the voice's confidence, its certainty. Whoever they were, they knew something we didn't, and they weren't afraid to let us know. As the message echoed across every screen, from news broadcasts to military communications, questions flooded in. Who were they? Where did they come from? And why, after all this time, were they revealing themselves now? As our experts worked around the clock to decode more signals, it became clear that this was no ordinary fleet. Their ships were advanced, but not in the way the Empires were. They didn't rely on the same technologies we were accustomed to seeing. Instead, their vessels seemed to blend in with their surroundings, almost as if they could phase in and out of sight. Their technology was so far beyond ours that we could barely even comprehend it. But it wasn't just their ships that were unlike anything we'd ever seen. It was their entire approach to war. The more we learned about them, the more we began to piece together a terrifying picture. These newcomers had no interest in conquest. They weren't here to expand an empire or dominate a galaxy. They were something else, entirely a force that had been watching the rise of the Empire for far longer than we had. A group that had learned to stay in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to make their move. And now, that moment had come. Our first direct contact with them came just days after the mysterious transmission. A small, sleek vessel detached from the larger fleet and entered our atmosphere, landing in an uninhabited region in the Arctic Circle. The media and military scrambled for information, but everything we learned only deepened the mystery. The ship was perfectly intact, but there were no markings, no symbols, no identifying features. It was as though it had been built in a completely different manner than anything we had seen. As the world watched, the door to the vessel opened, and a single figure stepped out. They were humanoid in shape, but their appearance was unlike anything we'd encountered. Their skin was a deep, metallic silver, reflecting the light of the distant sun. Their eyes glowed faintly, an eerie, almost unnatural shade of blue. They moved with an unsettling grace, each step deliberate and calculated. There was a sense of purpose in the way they walked, as though they had already anticipated every moment that led up to this one. When they spoke, their voice carried the same confidence we had heard before, calm, calculated, and certain. They didn't introduce themselves, nor did they explain why they were here. Instead, they simply said, "We are not your allies, nor are we your enemies. We are simply watchers." The world held its breath, waiting for more. But no explanation followed. The figure merely turned and walked back into the vessel, which quickly took off, disappearing back into the unknown. In the silence that followed, questions continued to swirl. Were they here to help us against the Empire, or were they simply waiting to see what would happen next? And why had they chosen to reveal themselves now? The arrival of this mysterious figure marked the beginning of a series of strange events. Over the next few days, their fleet remained at the edge of our solar system, seemingly watching us with the same eerie calm they had shown when they first appeared. They didn't attack. They didn't engage the Empire. They just watched. And then, as suddenly as they had come, they began to disappear one by one, their ships slipping out of sight, vanishing into the vastness of space. It was as though they had never been there at all. The Empire, on the other hand, wasn't so patient. They had watched our strange new neighbors, but they weren't the kind of force to back down in the face of uncertainty. Their ships continued to advance toward Earth, now even more determined to assert their dominance. They had their own message for us, a message of force, of power, and of finality. But we were ready. We had made our warning. We had told them to leave or face the consequences. The mystery of the unknown fleet had only added to the uncertainty. But whatever they were, whatever their intentions, the message was clear. Humanity would not be conquered. Not by the Empire. Not by anyone. As we stood at the precipice of the greatest battle humanity would ever face, we knew one thing for certain: the future of Earth and of the galaxy was now in our hands, and we would not be the ones to back down. The question was, would the Empire finally recognize our strength, or would they make the fatal mistake of underestimating us one last time? The countdown to the final confrontation had begun. The stakes had never been higher. And somewhere, out there, in the darkness of space, the fate of everything we knew was about to be decided. The days that followed were a blur of anticipation and fear. Every piece of news, every update from our military command, only seemed to add to the growing sense of impending doom. The Empire's fleet had not wavered in its advance. It wasn't just a show of force anymore, it was a promise of war. They were moving in with a singular purpose: to crush us. And with the mysterious fleet that had briefly appeared, then vanished, we were left with more questions than answers. Who were they really? Why had they come? Despite our best efforts, the Empire continued to push forward. Their armada, a massive and terrifying force, loomed ever closer, dominating our skies with its sheer size. They had no need for subtlety or diplomacy. This wasn't about negotiation, it was about domination. We had sent our warning, but they had not responded. They had not retreated. And now, the moment we feared was arriving. The last few hours before the inevitable clash were filled with tension. Communications between the nations of Earth had intensified as everyone tried to coordinate the final preparations for what seemed like certain annihilation. The world's leaders spoke with a sense of finality. There was no more room for negotiation. It wasn't just our technology or our military that was at stake. It was our very survival. And yet, in the middle of this uncertainty, a strange feeling settled over me. It was as though we were teetering on the edge of something we couldn't control, something far bigger than any of us. We weren't fighting just for Earth anymore. We were fighting for humanity's place in the galaxy, for our right to exist in a universe that had never known us as equals. We had prepared ourselves for the worst, but we had never truly understood the scale of what we were up against. The Empire's war machines were vast, their weapons deadly, and their commanders ruthless. It was hard to imagine that anything could stand against such an overwhelming force. But as the tension mounted, we began to realize that we had one advantage they couldn't account for: the strength of our will. As the Empire's fleet entered the outer reaches of our atmosphere. The first wave of their ships broke through the clouds, casting massive shadows over our cities. The world held its breath, watching from every screen as the unstoppable force approached. The first shots were fired, missiles soaring through the air, hitting their targets with terrifying accuracy. Earth cities erupted into chaos as the full scale of the attack began to unfold. Buildings crumbled. Sirens wailed. The earth itself seemed to tremble under the weight of the Empire's might. But even as destruction rained down, something unexpected happened. A flicker of resistance. A series of flashes erupted from the Earth's defense systems, striking the incoming ships with a surprising force. It wasn't enough to stop them, but it was enough to delay their advance. For the first time, we saw a glimmer of hope. Humanity wasn't going to go down without a fight. In the command centers, the mood shifted from one of desperation to determination. We weren't going to be annihilated quietly. We had prepared our own counterattacks, utilizing the stolen technology, the innovations we had developed over years of reverse engineering. But even with all that, it was still a long shot. Our weapons were nothing compared to the Empire's. And then, just as the Empire began its next wave of assault, a strange signal flashed across our communications channels. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but there was something undeniably familiar about it. Could it be them? Could the mysterious fleet be returning? A hushed silence fell over the room as we listened, trying to make sense of what we were hearing. The signal grew stronger. There were words, barely audible at first, but growing clearer with every passing second. It was a message from the unknown fleet, and this time they weren't hiding in the shadows. We have watched. We have waited. The Empire is your true enemy. But you are not alone. The words sent a chill through everyone who heard them. Who were these people? What did they mean by not alone? Was this some kind of trick, a desperate attempt to get us to lower our guard? Or was it possible that they truly had come to help us in our greatest hour of need? The Empire's forces were closing in on Earth's final defenses, but the timing of this transmission couldn't have been more crucial. Every military officer and strategist knew that time was running out. Our resources were dwindling. Our cities were falling, and we were still facing the full force of the Empire. Could we really trust this mysterious fleet? What did they mean by "you are not alone"? As the message played again, louder this time, a new signal followed. This time, it was unmistakable. A massive fleet of ships appeared in the sky, appearing like a storm cloud descending upon Earth. The ships shimmered, their edges glowing with energy that seemed both ancient and advanced. And there, in the middle of the fleet, was a figure. The same humanoid figure we had seen before, the one who had spoken with such confidence. This time, they were not alone. More ships began to materialize around them, an armada, unlike anything we had seen before. This fleet was not like the Empire's war machines. It was sleek, precise, its movements graceful and almost elegant. It was clear now these weren't just observers anymore. They here to fight. But as the two fleets prepared to clash, the question that hung in the air remained unanswered. Could humanity and these mysterious allies defeat the Empire? Or would we fall under the weight of their overwhelming power? The tension was unbearable. As the first shots were fired between the two fleets, the ground shook. The battle for the future of Earth had begun in earnest. And yet, despite everything, one thing remained clear. This was just the beginning. The true test of humanity's survival and the unknown force behind the mysterious fleet was yet to come. The battle raged above Earth, a chaotic dance of fire and destruction as the Empire's ships clashed with the mysterious fleet that had seemingly come to our aid. The skies burned with the intensity of the conflict, and below the world watched, holding its breath. It was a fight for survival, not just for Earth, but for the very existence of humanity in the galaxy. And yet, amidst the turmoil, something unexpected began to unfold. As the two fleets engaged, with energy blasts lighting up the night sky and the Earth's defense systems firing desperately in a bid to hold back the Empire's advance, a strange phenomenon occurred. At first, it was barely noticeable, a ripple in the space around the two fleets, a distortion that seemed to stretch the fabric of reality itself. But soon, it grew impossible to ignore. The space between the ships began to warp and twist, as if some unseen force was pushing against the very laws. It was a sight unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Ships disappeared into the folds of the distorted space, reappearing in different locations in an instant, their movements erratic and unpredictable. The Empire, in all its might, was thrown into disarray. Its powerful warships, once precise and deadly. It was as if the battlefield itself had turned against them. But it wasn't just the Empire that was being affected. The mysterious fleet, too, appeared to be struggling with the sudden distortion. Their elegant ships, which had once moved with such grace, were now caught in a battle to control their navigation, as if they were fighting against forces beyond their control. And then the truth hit. The distortion wasn't just a random anomaly. It was something deliberate, something intentional, a weapon. A new player had entered the fray, and they were making their presence felt in the most shocking way possible. From the heart of the distorted space, a massive ship emerged, unlike any other. Its design was completely foreign, nothing like the sleek vessels of the Empire or the mysterious fleet. It was enormous, its hull shimmering with a dark, unnatural energy. The ship seemed to pulse with life, as if it were breathing, its surface shifting and changing as though it were made of liquid metal. It was a creature of the void, its very existence defying everything we knew about the universe. The moment it appeared, both the Empire's fleet and the mysterious fleet halted their attacks. The distortion in space grew stronger, pulling at everything in its vicinity. This new force had arrived, and with it, the balance of power was thrown into chaos. Our communication systems crackled to life with a chilling message. This time, it was not the voice of the mysterious fleet that we had come to recognize, but something far colder, more commanding. You were never meant to survive this encounter. The Empire's mistake is not your only one. You are now the ones who must face the true rulers of the galaxy. The message sent a wave of panic through the command centers on Earth. Who were these new entities? Where had they come from? And why had they allowed the Empire to reach us in the first place? The implication was clear. The mysterious fleet we had relied on, the one we had believed to be our salvation, might have been no more than pawns in a larger game. As the enormous ship hovered above the battlefield, its dark energy radiating outward, a horrifying realization set in. The Empire, in all its vastness and power, had been nothing more than a distraction. The true threat had never been them. It had always been this new force, an ancient, unknowable power that had been watching and waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The Empire's ships, which had once appeared so formidable, now looked small and insignificant in the shadow of this new arrival. The unknown fleet, which had appeared to offer help, now seemed just as lost and vulnerable as we were. They, too, had been manipulated, drawn into a conflict that they hadn't fully understood. The battlefield, once a chaotic but clear conflict between two opposing forces, had now become a deadly game of survival, with humanity caught in the middle of an ancient power struggle that stretched across the stars. The ship's presence was a declaration that the balance of power in the galaxy was about to shift in ways no one could comprehend. The world below trembled as the dark ship released an energy pulse, an invisible shockwave that rattled Earth's atmosphere. For a moment, everything went still. The sounds of battle, the fires in the sky, the explosions that had been tearing through the clouds, all of it ceased, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Then, just as suddenly, the sky erupted once more. The Empire's fleet began to break apart. Their ships pulled into the distortion as if they were nothing more than toys in the hands of a child. The mysterious fleet, too, began to lose control, their vessels vanishing one by one into the darkness. The newly arrived ship's power was overwhelming, and it wasn't clear if even the mighty Empire could stand against it, let alone us. In the chaos, the transmission from the dark ship crackled again, this time louder and more insistent. The galaxy belongs to those who have the power to claim it. You, humanity, were never meant to be here. You were never meant to challenge the order of things. Your existence is an anomaly, and you will soon be erased. But just as the words hit us like a blow, a different message pierced through the static. It was weak, barely audible, but it carried the voice of the mysterious figure we had come to know. The game is not over. There is still time. Humanity. You must fight. The flickering transmission seemed like a final, desperate plea for us to survive. But who was it really directed at? Was it a last-ditch attempt to save us, or a warning that we had crossed a line we could never return from? In that moment, the full weight of the situation crashed down. The Empire, the mysterious fleet, and now this ancient power, what had started as a conflict over Earth's survival, had become something far more terrifying. We weren't just fighting for our planet anymore. We were fighting for our very existence in the galaxy. The fate of humanity now rested on a knife's edge, and it wasn't clear who, if anyone, would walk away from this battle unscathed. As the universe trembled and the ships around us began to disintegrate, one thing was certain: the greatest challenge we had ever faced was only just beginning. The battle had reached its peak, the sky above Earth ablaze with the fire of a conflict that no one had ever imagined. The massive dark ship, its energy pulses shattering everything in its path, loomed over the remnants of the Empire's fleet, which had been completely torn apart. The mysterious fleet, once thought to be our saviors, had vanished into the chaos, their ships caught in the dark energy waves of the colossal vessel. Humanity, caught in the midst of it all, had nowhere to turn. Every hope seemed lost. But in that moment, something incredible happened. The strange metallic figure that had first appeared to us, an enigma we had barely begun to understand, reappeared, not in a ship, but on the battlefield itself. Floating through the chaos, their presence seemed to calm the surrounding distortion. Their glowing eyes focused on the massive ship, and for a split second, the world held its breath. A crackling energy filled the air, and with a force that shook the very ground beneath us, the dark ship's power seemed to falter, the distortion in space subsiding for the briefest of moments. For the first time since its arrival, the massive ship hesitated, its dark energy flickering and fading. The Empire's forces, still reeling from their sudden defeat, took notice. In that instant, they gathered what little remained of their strength, rallying behind the unknown force that had joined the fray. But as they prepared to strike back, the metallic figure spoke. "This is not your war to win." The voice echoed through every transmission, clear and final. "It is humanity's. You have been the catalyst for this. Now you must finish it." There was no time to process the words. The battle was still raging. But the realization struck us like a thunderclap. The mysterious fleet, the seemingly indifferent force, had not come here to fight alongside the Empire or even to watch us suffer. They had been waiting for this moment, the moment when humanity would prove that we had the strength to survive, to fight back. The dark ship, once an unstoppable force, now began to lose its power. Its pulses were weaker, its energy surging erratically. The space around it seemed to be tearing apart, as though the fabric of reality itself was unraveling under the weight of its influence. The Empire's fleet, confused and vulnerable, attempted to flee. The final blow came not from any weapon, but from the very space around them, sucked into the distortion. Their ships disappeared in an instant, vanishing without a trace. As the dark ship's power dissipated, the metallic figure turned toward Earth. There was no triumph in their gaze, no sign of victory. They were not here to celebrate. They were here to finish what had been started, what the Empire had set into motion so long ago. The fate of humanity, it seemed, had always been in our hands. But just as we began to believe the battle was over, a final twist, a shocking revelation, emerged. The metallic figure, who had once been our mysterious ally, now spoke again, their voice echoing through the broadcast system, cutting through the silence that had followed the battle's end. "You were never meant to defeat the Empire. You were never meant to stand against them. You were always meant to be the key. The Empire has fallen, yes, but the real enemy has always been you." The words hit like a punch to the gut. The air seemed to freeze around us as the implications settled in. The mysterious fleet wasn't here to save us. They weren't even truly on our side. They had been watching us, guiding us toward this moment, knowing that humanity's own destructive tendencies would one day turn against us. We had become the very thing we had fought against. The metallic figure's form shifted, morphing into something unrecognizable. Their silver skin rippled, their body expanding and contracting, as if shedding its previous identity. With a flick of their hand, the distortion in space returned, but now it was focused on Earth. A dark cloud enveloped the planet, as though it were being drawn into a void. And as we watched, helpless, the true purpose of the mysterious fleet became clear. We are the custodians of the galaxy. We are the ones who ensure that the balance is maintained. And now, humanity's time has come to an end. You were not meant to evolve this far. The twist was worse than we had feared. The metallic figure revealed their true nature. They were not some outside force seeking to protect us from the Empire. They were an ancient entity, part of an order that had kept the galaxy in check for eons. Humanity's rapid evolution, our defiance, had upset the delicate balance they had worked to maintain. We had outgrown our place in the universe, and the consequences were dire. As the dark cloud descended, the last remnants of hope began to fade. The Empire, in all its terror, had been a mere pawn in this cosmic game. We had survived the Empire's invasion, but we were now facing a force far more powerful, a force that had been orchestrating our rise and fall for longer than we could comprehend. And then, just as everything seemed lost, A new message pierced through the chaos. It was the voice of the figure we had once believed to be our enemy. But this time, there was a subtle change in tone, a hint of regret, of something almost human. "I never wanted this. I only wanted to see if you would make the choice." For the briefest of moments, we saw them not as an invincible force, but as something more complicated. Were they regretful? Was this all a test, a trial to see if humanity could make the right choice? Were we really so dangerous that our existence itself had to be erased? As the distortion began to envelop Earth, it became clear that the final decision was ours. Would we succumb to the ancient forces that controlled the galaxy's balance, or would we defy them once again and carve out a future for ourselves in the universe? But before we could act, the distortion blinked out of existence. The dark cloud faded. The metallic figure's presence vanished. And just like that, the galaxy was still. The battle was over, but the consequences of our survival were just beginning. The future of humanity remained uncertain. The Empire was gone, but the true enemies had never been fully revealed. And as Earth took its first breath of relief, we couldn't shake the feeling that we had just begun a far greater journey, one that would stretch beyond the stars, into the very heart of the galaxy itself. For several moments, the world held its breath. The dark cloud that had swallowed the Earth slowly began to dissipate, fading away into the nothingness it had come from. The distortion in the air, the overwhelming force that had bent the laws of space and time, vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. There was a palpable stillness in the atmosphere, like the planet was suspended in a moment of quiet disbelief. It was as if reality itself had taken a step back to reevaluate everything. Humanity had survived, but the victory felt hollow. The confusion, the shock, and the lingering questions left everyone reeling. What had just happened? What had we truly faced? And more importantly, what was the price of our survival? The metallic figure, who had once seemed invincible, had vanished without a trace. The dark ship, the catalyst of this whole conflict, was no more. The Empire, which had threatened to overwhelm us, was gone as well. All that remained was the aftermath, the eerie quiet after the storm, and the uncertainty that followed. Earth's leaders gathered in the command centers, struggling to make sense of the events. Communication systems were scrambled, reports were fragmented, and no one knew who, if anyone, to trust. The mysterious fleet, which had been our supposed allies, had disappeared into the unknown. No transmissions, no sightings. They were gone, leaving us to pick up the pieces. But amid the confusion, one thing was clear: humanity had endured. We had faced impossible odds, battled the most powerful forces in the galaxy, and survived. Yet, as the dust settled, the gravity of what had happened began to sink in. We had no answers. The galaxy's true rulers, those who had remained hidden in the shadows, had revealed themselves only to disappear again, leaving humanity with no clear path forward. Days passed as Earth tried to reclaim its stability. Rebuilding was slow, painful. Entire cities had been destroyed in the conflict. Technology had been lost. Resources were dwindling, and people were mourning the loss of loved ones. The war, as it had been called, was over, but the consequences would ripple across generations. In the midst of the chaos, a new question began to emerge. What now? We had survived, but we were left with no clear direction. What did survival mean if it came at the cost of everything we had known? It was then that a message appeared, seemingly from nowhere. The transmission was weak at first, but it grew stronger. It was not the voice of the mysterious fleet, nor was it the cold, commanding tone of the dark entity that had once tried to erase us. Instead, it was a familiar voice, human. "We have been given a chance," the voice said. "A chance to rebuild, to understand, and to grow. We are not alone in this universe, and we never were. But the galaxy is not a playground, and survival is not a guarantee. We must find our place within it. The universe has a way of testing those who rise. But it also offers opportunity. We must decide what kind of future we will create." The voice was vague, but its message was clear. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about understanding our role in the greater cosmos. It was a challenge, an invitation, a warning. In the days that followed, the transmissions became more frequent, each one carrying a piece of information, a clue, or a reminder. These weren't from the mysterious fleet. They were from humans. The survivors, scattered across Earth and beyond, were beginning to communicate. Small groups of people, banding together in the wake of the chaos, were uncovering ancient knowledge, technologies, and artifacts that had been hidden for eons. They were connecting the dots, trying to understand the truth about the galaxy and about the forces that had been manipulating events. But as they dug deeper, something unsettling began to emerge. The galaxy, as it turned out, had its own rules that didn't care for the well-being of a single species, no matter how resilient or determined. The mysterious fleet, the dark entity that had almost obliterated humanity, and the Empire, it was all part of a much larger cosmic order, one that had been shaping the course of civilizations for millennia. It became clear that humanity's survival had never been a matter of chance. We had been tested, manipulated, and monitored by powers far beyond our understanding. The dark ship, the entities behind the mysterious fleet, and the collapse of the Empire, everything had been orchestrated as a trial, a final test of humanity's strength, adaptability, and potential. But now, with the war over, the question remained, what would humanity do with this second chance? The answer wasn't simple. Earth's leaders, scientists, and the scattered survivors struggled with what to do next. Should humanity try to re-enter the galactic fold, taking its place among the stars, or should we retreat into our own corner of the universe, forever wary of the forces that had once sought to destroy us? The metallic figure, who had once seemed invincible, had vanished without a trace. The dark ship, the catalyst of this whole conflict, was no more. The Empire, which had threatened to overwhelm us, was gone as well. All that remained was the aftermath, the eerie quiet after the storm. Earth's leaders gathered in the command centers, struggling to make sense of the events. Communication systems were scrambled, reports were fragmented, and no one knew who, if anyone, to trust. The mysterious fleet, which had been our supposed allies, had disappeared into the unknown. No transmissions, no sightings. They were gone, leaving us to pick up the pieces. But amid the confusion, one thing was clear: humanity had endured. We had faced impossible odds, battled the most powerful forces in the galaxy, and survived. Yet, as the dust settled, the gravity of what had happened began to sink in. We had no answers. The galaxy's true rulers, those who had remained hidden in the shadows, had revealed themselves only to disappear again, leaving humanity with no clear path forward. Days passed as Earth tried to reclaim its stability. Rebuilding was slow, painful. Entire cities had been destroyed in the conflict. Technology had been lost. Resources were dwindling, and people were mourning the loss of loved ones. The war, as it had been called, was over, but the consequences would ripple across generations. In the midst of the chaos, a new question began to emerge. What now? We had survived, but we were left with no clear direction. What did survival mean if it came at the cost of everything we had known? It was then that a message appeared, seemingly from nowhere. The transmission was weak at first, but it grew stronger, clearer. It was not the voice of the mysterious fleet, nor was it the cold, commanding tone of the dark entity that had once tried to erase us. Instead, it was a familiar voice, human. "We have been given a chance," the voice said. "A chance to rebuild, to understand, and to grow. We are not alone in this universe, and we never were. But the galaxy is not a playground, and survival is not a guarantee. We must find our place within it. The universe has a way of testing those who rise, but it also offers opportunity. We must decide what kind of future we will create." The voice was vague, but its message was clear. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about understanding our role in the greater cosmos. It was a challenge, an invitation, a warning. In the days that followed, the transmissions became more frequent, each one carrying a piece of information, a clue or a reminder. These weren't from the mysterious fleet. They were from humans. The survivors, scattered across Earth and beyond, were beginning to communicate. Small groups of people, banding together in the wake of the chaos, were uncovering ancient knowledge, technologies, and artifacts that had been hidden for eons. They were connecting the dots, trying to understand the truth about the galaxy and about the forces that had been manipulating events. But as they dug deeper, something unsettling began to emerge. The galaxy, as it turned out, had its own rules that didn't care for the well-being of a single species, no matter how resilient or determined. The mysterious fleet, the dark entity that had almost obliterated humanity, and the Empire, it was all part of a much larger cosmic order, one that had been shaping the course of civilizations for millennia. It became clear that humanity's survival had never been a matter of chance. We had been tested, manipulated, and monitored by powers far beyond our understanding. The dark ship, the entities behind the mysterious fleet, and the collapse of the Empire, everything had been orchestrated as a trial, a final test of humanity's strength, adaptability, and potential. But now, with the war over, the question remained, what would humanity do with this second chance? The answer wasn't simple. Earth's leaders, scientists, and the scattered survivors struggled with what to do next. Should humanity try to re-enter the galactic fold, taking its place among the stars? Or should we retreat into our own corner of the universe, forever wary of the forces that had once sought to destroy us?